All right, welcome everyone to Workshop 3, Developing Business Models and Solutions. I hope everyone has been enjoying the workshops. We've had good feedback through the evaluations. And I'd like to thank our faculty fellows. We have Carter presenting as our faculty fellow. But I'd also like to thank Yu-Ho Kim, Kathy Levy, Ray Mansfield, Neil Shortland, Tom Wilkes, Kevin, who's back there, and Kalila Walkowitz. So thank you. I'd also like to thank Tom O'Donnell, who's been coming to the workshops, and Maria, and Khaled, and Vijay from the Office of Technology Transfer, and Maria, our adjunct faculty, who's been coming from the Manning School of Business. So thank you all for helping us out. It's really appreciated. So I just want to, I'm not good at the clapping, so I appreciate it, Carter. So just to remember, March 3rd, your idea plans are due at 5 o'clock. If you have any questions, let us know in the next couple of days. On the 14th, the semifinals will be announced. On the 16th, we'll be having workshop 4, where the semifinals will come and they'll get They'll get a pitch coaching session and a pitch coaching workshop. But following that, we're actually going to give individualized pitch coaching over Zoom for everybody from March 20 to 24th, and I'll be sending that out at that point for the schedule. And on the 27th, your rocket pitch presentation will be due. And if you aren't one of the final semifinalists, let's see, so the rocket pitch. So we'll also talk about, you also want to get us your team posters, because if you're not making it to the semifinals, it's also eligible for fan favorite and the idea challenge. On the 4th, we'll have our preliminary pitch off. So basically everyone will go into rooms and with 3 or 4, each team will go into a room with 3 or 4 judges. You'll present, and then you'll get scored based on that. So the initial scoring is done with readers, and that's how we kind of pick the semifinalists. And then on the 13th, we have the 50K Idea Challenge. So tonight's agenda is we're going to talk about business models, then we're going to have an activity, and then we'll talk about value proposition, and another activity, and then we're going to wrap up the night. And make sure everybody eats, there's plenty of food, so that's the other piece, make sure everyone grabs food. And all semifinalist teams have a chance to win funding, so remember that. Submit your poster by the 27th at 5, and then we'll also be sending an email template after March 14th. If you need help, you can email me. There's my email address up there. You can also check with me or come by Difference Maker Central, or just email differencemaker@uml.edu, and I'll get that also. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Carter. Thank you so much, Carter. Appreciate it.
All righty. Hello, everybody. How are we doing?
Good.
Good? Okay. I will apologize in advance if I shout too loud into the microphone, because I am usually a very energetic speaker that doesn't need a microphone. So if I'm too loud, I apologize. I know some of you know that because you've been in my class before. But if you can't hear me, also give me a same sign of flag me down if you can't hear me, okay? As David said, I am Carter Keogh. I am one of the Difference Maker Faculty Fellows, and I am also a teaching professor in the College of Engineering, specifically in the Mechanical and Industrial Engineering Department. And I, along with Tom today, will be kind of going through our business models. I will be doing a lot of the talking, but he's going to make sure that we cover all the points today, okay? If at any point you have questions, let me know, and I can try and answer them as best we can. But there will be opportunity today to discuss your business model, how you would go about developing it, and get some feedback from your peers at the table, okay? But before we do that, I think it would be helpful for us to have a general consensus on what we mean when we're saying business models, all right? So when we're talking about a business model, we are referring to the way a company will plan, or a company, in this case you, will plan to make money to either generate profit or to support itself, okay? Now, in order for us to make money, we need to look at a variety of different things, including our revenue sources, our customer base, our products and services, and how we plan to finance our ventures. Okay? Now, there are a variety of different types of business models because every business is different. Yours may match one of the ones that I'm going to talk about as examples, but it very well likely may be that you have a completely different business model that we don't touch on today. All right? But I want to give you an idea of what a couple business models are from some of the big name brands that you may be familiar with or that you've seen around. All right? So when we are looking at business models, first one I want to talk on is FedEx. Now, everyone may be familiar, this is a parcel delivery service. What makes them stand out from other parcel delivery services is the fact that they take advantage of what's called a hub and spoke business model. All right, so they are operating with distribution centers where all the large number of packages kind of funnel into that one distribution center, and those distribution centers branch off into the local distribution to the end customer. So you have a lot of your big transportation costs, big transportation logistics funneled into a singular location or a fewer number of locations, and then it branches off from there. So it's minimizing the cost of those big bulk, long distance transport, okay? Now, another one is Zipcar, all right? This is, for those not familiar, is basically a short-term ride-sharing service, okay? And in this service, people can rent a car by the day, by the hour, where other companies like Hertz or Rent a Car would only rent out a car by the day or by the week. Okay, so what makes Zipcar stand out is for its business model is that it is taking the profits and trying to maximize them by utilizing the singular car investment or capital investment, which is the car, and maximizing its utilization. So if someone only needs it for 30 minutes, they can check it out for 30 minutes and return it, as opposed to saying needing to rent a car for a full day. Okay? Another business model we want to touch on is PillPack. All right? PillPack is a mail order pharmacy, for those who aren't familiar, where patients or customers can get pre-dosed medications shipped directly to their door. This is advantageous for PillPack and what makes them stand out because a lot of customers don't want to drive to the pharmacy. Maybe there's not a 24-hour pharmacy nearby. They want to be able to get that quickly. And so PillPack makes money by using the distribution centers for parcel delivery to ship out products to make it easier to access for their customers. Another model another company you may be familiar with is Gillette. This company makes razors and razor blades. They have a unique model. They were one of the first ones to operate what's called razor and blade business model. Now, it got the name because of how they structure the pricing for the razors themselves and the individual blades. So in this business model, Gillette will market and sell the handle or the fixed blade at a reduced cost or at cost to the price of production. But then they will make a profit based on the renewable purchase of the individual blades. Okay, so while you're not getting profit from the individual handles, you will see a profit return based on the consumable blades that are needing to be repurchased when they dole out each and every time. Okay?
And you're forced to buy the blades.
Yes.
The handle only fits their blades.
Mm-hmm. That's
So
exactly right.
So here's a question. Out of those 4 companies, another objective of many entrepreneurs is exhibited by 2 out of those 4 companies. Anybody care to guess what that ultimate objective was?
Increase sales.
Okay,
So like Mock uses it to their platform, like kind of platform.
yeah. It's the two on the right. Any idea? PillPack got acquired by Amazon. And PillPack folks made a bunch of money, including the investors. Gillette, as a large established company, got acquired by another large established consumer goods company. Any idea who that was? Procter & Gamble, right. So, as an entrepreneur, whether that is or isn't, it's something to always consider as you grow, who to partner with and who potentially you could get acquired by. Not to say that's the end goal, just something to consider.
Yes, thank you. And we'll also continue to reinforce that idea because that is how you can sustain your company and sustain your business by finding ways that you can partner with other groups and other organizations. And so your business models will need to reflect that down the line. But before we get there and reinforce that excellent point, I want to talk through another example. So far we've talked through mainly companies who offer products or services, but I want to talk through an example where maybe the service isn't as easily identifiable. So I know this may not be the mainstream social media platform anymore, but hopefully everybody is aware of Facebook and what it does. So ultimately, Facebook is marketed as being able to allow its users to connect with each other in an online platform. But really, Facebook is a business, and it is a for-profit business. What it is utilizing is a way of taking advantage of the customer and their audience and selling that audience membership and that time and visibility to the customers to advertisers. Okay, so all of the companies like Gillette, FedEx, Zipcar, PillPack would pay for an advertisement and access to the customer base of Facebook. Okay, and in addition, Facebook does provide feedback on what customers want. So if FedEx needs to know what they need to improve for their company and what direction they would need to move in the future to be relevant, Facebook could provide some feedback, and all of that is through the reactions and the likes, dislikes, all of these things. Okay. Now, each one of these has unique business models. But ultimately, it's the details that matter and that make them work, okay? And so knowing the details of your business will help you make the most out of your revenue stream, make the most out of your audience, and so on. And so I like kind of this example when it comes to Facebook. It's important to keep in mind your audience because as this kind of example says, if you are not paying for it, you're ultimately going to be the customer. Or you're not the customer, you're going to be ultimately what is being sold. Okay? So understanding where you fit into the larger system, where you fit into the supply chain, where you fit into the consumer market matters. Okay? Now, in addition to knowing kind of what would make you stand apart, it's also helpful to understand where you fit and how your business would evolve over time throughout the various milestones of your new venture. Okay? Now, every new venture is going to take its own path, but by and large, new companies, entrepreneurship, startups will fit into kind of this timeline. Right? So you're always going to start with an idea. You're going to go through some level of prototyping, first product development, first sales, where you can also get market establishment, and then you can one day hopefully merge with other companies and understand how you can maybe acquire funding through the public offering. Okay? Now, regardless of where you initially start in this venture, the goal of a business model is to help get you from the idea to making an impact in the market, okay? So you're going to maybe have to jump back and forth along this trend or this timeline in order to finally see the impact. But you want to make sure that your business model will eventually help you get from that idea to that impact that you're looking for, okay? Now, in addition to going through all these steps, your business models do have to account for changes. Changes in product and technology, changes in your market, changes in your individual entrepreneurship team that you are working with, and changes to the regulatory or legal legislation that is out there on the market right now that's affecting the industry. Okay, and each one of these kind of milestones along the timeline, indicated by the different color, has various risks and various impacts for technology and the marketing team and so on, okay? Now, are there any questions on any of this? Okay, I don't see any questions or burning questions. So, yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Just something to consider. What percentage, roughly speaking, of successful ventures became successful with exactly the same concepts that they put in place on their original business plans? Huh?
Less than 10.
There's potentially some, right? I don't know what the percentage is, but it's really small. And so the point of this is be prepared to adjust and adapt as you learn more, as you see more, and especially if you're working on something that's kind of pushing the envelope. If you're doing something that's low risk, low impact, and you're only going from here to here, yeah, well, you may not change. Doing something impactful, assume it's going to change, adapt, and understand as many of those risks as you can and knock them down and ultimately position for success. And I think that business model, to the points being made, has to be flexible enough for you to do that adapting. So just something to consider.
Excellent point, excellent point. And to know how to adapt to all of these different things, it's important for us to understand the relationship between each of these things that we're trying to account for. And so it's very hard to kind of understand the nebulous relationships for each individual kind of entrepreneurial team that's here today, but we can group them into kind of 3 different categories for each and every team. So we need to understand how our company or our team would have a relationship with the product and technology on the market. And we also need to understand our market and relative business models, okay? And so we can understand where these would fit by asking a couple questions. So we can ask, how would our company provide this service? What service are we providing, or what product are we providing? Why are we even doing this? What does the market want? Okay? And in doing so, we can answer and identify how our product would fit. So we can identify the technology and team fit. So for example, how your team would best support the product and technology that you are producing or making. And this would also identify how you would support the continued quality of your product over time as demand increases and your production needs to increase. You can also start to identify the fit between your market and your team. Okay, so how maybe the team founder connects with the market would impact the success of the business. And maybe your idea, your market needs an industry expert, or you need someone who's been into the industry for a long time to make it work. Maybe you need someone who's fresh to the scene in order to make it work, because you have a new hip trend that you want to kind of make sense of and market and sell the service to. So you need to understand that. In addition, by asking these 3 questions of why, how, and what, you're ultimately defining your product market fit, which kind of ties back to some of the exercises from the previous workshops in carving out your niche for your product or your service. Okay? Now, by knowing where each of these fits are and what they look like, we will ultimately understand and create a definition for the value proposition that we have and the value chain. Now, in talking with the value proposition.
Can I just go back to the other slide?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes it's helpful to put on kind of a hat of somebody that you're trying to convince that what you're doing is compelling, right? And when you look at this slide, you talk to a lot of investors, because there's so many different factors that they look at, and they get really good at this kind of complex pattern recognition, so that when they sift through those thousands of opportunities, they start selecting which ones they actually want to invest in, right? So if you took all those factors that they look at and they consider, a lot of them would say they bucket them into these 3 buckets. The technology itself, the product, is it compelling? Is it unique? Is it protectable? Is there intellectual property behind it? Lots of different questions. Second one, does it address a real compelling need around a large market that's potentially unmet today, right? And the third one is, okay, great technology, compelling market. Can they deliver? Can the team deliver? Out of those 3 buckets, which one do you think the venture capitalists rely on the most in their decision criteria?
Team,
Yeah, the team. Why?
they want to be able to make sure that those people can actually deliver what they promised to.
Yes, deliver what they promised, but again, what I said before, the assumption is technology is probably going to change and shift. The market's probably going to change and shift. So if the team doesn't know how to do that and adapt and move with that, it's gonna die. So bet on the jockey, not so much the horse, right? So that's why these 3 buckets, it's a good way to just have a mental model of what you're trying to pull together, because there's so many pieces.
And there's so many pieces that you're trying to convince others that your business and your specific service or product is fulfilling, right? And that's ultimately the value that your team and your company would provide, okay? Which kind of boils into the next slide. So thank you for that kind of good segue into the next slide. And so we're going to talk through value proposition and understanding how we can define our niche and how we would ultimately, or what we would ultimately need to include in our description and in our sales pitch, so to speak, of our business. Okay, so for those not familiar with the term of value proposition, it is essentially a simple statement that clearly communicates how your product or your service benefits your customer, and ultimately that promise that you would be benefiting to your customer. Okay, so to elaborate, this is how your company would bring value to the customer, and so you need to identify, what does your company provide? Is it a product? Is it a service? Is it both? Because sometimes you offer a product but you have a service that goes along with it, maybe of installation or maintenance that you can utilize. Okay. You also need to ask yourself, in understanding the value that your product or your service has, who your customer is, and what that they would perceive as the value to your product or to your service. Okay? Because ultimately, if it brings them enough value, you can maybe identify if it is a painkiller, is it a vitamin, and what we mean by that is the customer seeing what you are offering an optional thing that just makes their life a little bit easier, a little bit better, or is it fulfilling a gut-wrenching need that they have? Does your product bring value of making it faster, better, cheaper than other people out on the market? Okay? If you answer yes to those, or you have enough, maybe you can see how the customer would return value or return value to your company in the sense of buying your product, paying for your service. Okay? Now, the ideal goal is that this value that the customer would see would ultimately get returned in the form of cash. And when you offset the cost, if your revenue generated by your customer is more than your cost, you get profits. Okay? Now, profits don't apply just for for-profit companies. I want to make a small point here. It does also apply to nonprofit companies. All right? Because regardless of if you have a for-profit or a nonprofit, you need income that will ultimately support that company and allow it to grow in the future, or to help offset the costs of the workers or the product that you're providing. Okay? So we want to make sure we can identify each of these kind of 4 points on here. All right? And I realize I should have clicked one more time because it's right there. Okay, are there any questions? All right. Now, if we want to develop a really, really good business model, we need to understand that small little circle and that small little loop in a bigger scale and how other factors kind of affect this one little loop. Okay, so we need to understand our company. That kind of makes sense. We need to understand what product or service or differentiated value we are offering our customer. We need to understand who our customer is or who our customers are. We need to understand what they're willing to pay for that product or service. We also need to know how we are going to get that product and service to our consumer. Okay? So are you going to be the direct provider of that service? Or are you going to go through another third party? Are you going to acquire the distribution channels to get your product to the doorstep of your customer? That's an important piece that you need to understand, is the channel. In addition, you need to understand where your suppliers are and who they are. So if you are making a product that requires metals or plastics, where are you getting those metals and plastics from? Are you going to be utilizing off-the-shelf products? Are you going to be utilizing distribution channels that require you to purchase part of their boxes and labeling systems, or have a subscription into their service? Okay? In addition, kind of off to the side, is you need to understand your investors. Okay? Investors are ultimately going to help funnel money into your company or into your product. And so you need to understand who they are, what they would be willing to pay for, how much investment in the company they would be willing to make, and what your company would have to offer them in return. Okay, because it is kind of a one-to-one, just like with the company and the customer. Your investors need to see a return. Okay, just as much as you want to see money from them, they need to see a return. For the simplicity of the slide, we've not included the loops there, but it is still an important thing to factor in. And last but not least, we need to understand how your business models or your ideas would be different from the competitors, because ultimately you need to know who your competitors are, because maybe they're after the same investor, maybe they're after the exact same customer demographic, maybe they're after your distribution channel that gets your service out there. Okay, so you need to understand where they fit into your larger business model, and maybe you want to carve out a niche that blocks them out of the way so you can be the sole provider there. Okay, questions on this? Alrighty, so one last thing before we move on to talking about value chain. It's important to remember that this particular piece of our value proposition, how we differentiate ourselves, has larger impact. So each of these little pieces in the blue screen, or the various arrows connecting these pieces, have or can be impacted for various reasons. For political reasons, economic reasons, social reasons, technological, environment, legal, regulatory policy. Any changes to any of these kind of 6 key areas will impact how this kind of diagram would work. Maybe it adds another channel in the middle between you and the customer. Maybe it adds more competitors in there. Maybe it means that your investors can't invest as much as they would like to. Okay? All of these have various impacts, and so we need to start accounting for changes in technology, changes in the political sectors, changes in social dynamics, stuff like that. Okay? Absolutely.
So when you look at these factors, it's that broader context that you may not be able to control all those larger factors, but you better understand them, be able to adapt to them, especially if, for instance, your business model is dependent upon tax credits or incentives from the government, and in a year or two, those tax credits and incentives go away, right? That's not a good thing. What if, for instance, you guys are maybe not too young, back in 2007 to 2009, what was going on? The Great Recession, right? If you didn't understand that broader context at that point in time, okay, you might not have been able to survive that trough, make it through, and position for longer term success. So again, awareness of and ability to adapt, and maybe influence by virtue of lobbying on some of these, for instance, regulatory policy, but just be aware.
Absolutely. And this will ultimately, by having awareness of each of these factors, it allows you to understand where you fit in as well. Okay? So when we're looking at it, you need to understand your value chain and where you fit between the flow of product development and the flow of money being returned. Okay? So this is where you would define your location between maybe where you're getting your raw materials from, where you are getting maybe subsystems from. Are you dealing with wholesalers? Where do you fit along this nice path? Okay? You want to add it? Okay.
The main point here is that you can't do everything, right? There are very few companies who ever have tried and who ever could. And the great example that we give a lot of times is the Ford Motor Company back in the early 20th century, where they actually grew their own wood, mined their own raw materials for steel, manufactured their own steel, mined sand and created glass, built the engines, created all the electrical components, built the cars and vehicles, actually sold the cars and vehicles, and supported and maintained the cars and vehicles for their customers. I challenge you to find a company today that even comes close to that. It just doesn't happen. So in that landscape of from raw materials to finished product to distribution out and touching the end customer, where do you play? And if you think about it, another example, Tesla. Where did Tesla start as a company, do you think?
Paper?
Tesla, the car company.
Oh.
What did they do? They were a car company. They got all the components from other folks and they integrated them together and sold those cars to customers. But they did two other things. Because they didn't want to deal with the existing distribution model, auto dealers, what did they do? They decided to create that direct-to-consumer model, created some showrooms, right? But also, initially, they could not find batteries, lithium-ion batteries, that met their need. So they reverse integrated and also started becoming a battery company, right? So now they initially started in one niche, the car, but they forward integrated to become a dealer as well, and they reverse integrated to become a component manufacturer of batteries. And you look today, what have they also done? Well, they've taken that battery position and now they do other things, like do batteries for homes, for storing electricity from solar panels on homes, and other things. So, really interesting business model that adapted and changed. So this says, where do you sit? Just don't try to do too much. And pick that point where you have the most advantage versus folks who are playing in that space.
Question. For the forward motor company that's in the center when they try to do everything.
Yeah.
If you look in today, for example, Uber, who is kind of doing nothing, in the sense where they're managing everyone in the process. Total opposite model. Would you, the benefits of managing all versus trying to do a few, I'm just wondering what approach would make the most sense for, a business.
So the other thing to keep in mind on this, right? And see how that money arrow flows this way? Means everybody in that value chain gets a piece of the pie, right? But not shared equally. It's all negotiated based upon where most of the value is. Not necessarily even based upon how much is contributed in terms of time, effort, resources, whatever the case may be. I would suggest that Uber, Airbnb, and others have carved out a nice niche as the purveyor of those hard products, vehicle rides, or vacation or rental properties, whatever. And they're getting a pretty big piece, relatively speaking, of that value pie for, quite frankly, a very small amount of effort on an ongoing basis. And they've leveraged that because of the technology infrastructure that they've built, right? Which is pretty cool. And they did a smart thing. They focused on their value and where they have competitive advantage and stayed there.
Excellent question. And to tack on one more thing, when you're trying to decide if you want to be the Ford Motor Company or the Uber, and understanding how much of this system you want, it will vary on what product you're trying to offer. And so sometimes it makes sense to have the partnerships with, or to acquire the supplier side, but not the distribution side. Maybe it makes sense to get the packaging in your product at the same time and own that, and own the distribution side. So it all makes sense based on your individual product and your individual business. But knowing kind of where you would fit or how much of this you would want, you need to ask yourself a couple questions, okay? First one, who are your customers? Who are your end users? Is it Home Depot? Is it Lowe's who's selling your product? Is it the doctors themselves who are using your medical device? Ultimately, who is using or benefiting from your service? Who is using your product? Okay? You also have to ask, what makes your product or your service different from the other ones out on the market? And how are you delivering that differentiated product to them, and how you would go about getting it in their household or in their office. You also need to ask, what is your proposed price and cost structure? And what is your revenue generation model? If you've ever watched Shark Tank, you've probably asked, or you've heard them ask about the proposed price. What does it cost you to make an individual product? What does it cost you or what's your revenue that's generated? How much are you willing to sell this for? Those are important questions because ultimately that will dictate how much revenue you can bring back into your company, how much growth you can possibly have in the future. Okay? You also need to ask who are your suppliers, and maybe down the line, who are your potential partners? Okay? So, for PillPack example, they maybe saw they wanted to partner with Amazon to utilize their distribution. Okay? Because fighting with Amazon's individual hubs and the delivery personnel, they weren't going to be able to compete for the price point. So partnering with them, they can further create beneficial cost structures for their company. Similarly with suppliers, if they wanted to understand where the medication was coming from, if they aren't the ones producing it, how can they partner with those suppliers of the medication? You also need to ask, what is your position in the industry and the value chain? Okay, so where you fit along that kind of roadmap that we had before on the screen. Okay? And then lastly, how do you capture the ultimate or the optimal value from the value chain? How can you maximize and squeeze out every single penny from each of these different sectors? How can you maximize the amount of value that the customer is willing to return to you? Okay? Some of these are easier to answer than others, but all of them will ultimately change as your business will develop and it will grow. Okay? So, for a brief break from us talking, I want each of you have a mental exercise with an activity. And answer the question of defining your industry value chain. So if you are working in medical devices, who are your suppliers? Who are your customers? Who are your competitors? Who is producing the products that you would need to develop your medical device? If you're providing a service, who is going to who's going to get your customer base? Who is going to handle your advertisement? Who is going to look at any legal policy that you need to make sure that it makes sense and you are still able to offer that service? Where do all these pieces fit for your company? Okay? And then also, as a follow-up, once you define your value chain, think on where you might be in that position. Okay? So let's take a couple minutes and do that. Do we have one or two teams or one or two people who want to maybe identify one of the answers to these questions? Like where you would find the value for your idea? Do we have anybody that wants to share? Maybe we can keep it also simple of who your suppliers would be and who your customers are. Yeah.
So ours is making educational kind of hobbyist kits, and so the value chain is someone has to at some point make them raw materials and then turn those into components and then make those into the kits and then somehow get those kits to the end consumers. And so ours is going to be in making the kits from the components or maybe even the raw materials. And then maybe we'll get them to the end consumers ourselves, and maybe we will have to find someone else to help advertise and sell them for us.
So a follow-up question on that. It sounds that concept, it's coming together. So good job on that. What's going to stop somebody else from doing exactly what you're proposing doing? In other words, how are you going to maintain, or even if you want to, maintain your competitive advantage?
I think that we'll just have to do that by, I don't know, maybe my partner has some plans, but I think we might just have to do that by doing it better, especially because what we're planning to do is, or it would be almost good to have someone else trying to do the same thing because what we're doing is good, so more people doing it creates more benefit. So I guess we'll just have to do it better if they.
So an open source model.
Yeah.
So for our product, it's kind of like a an app that goes directly to the consumer. So all it goes is that it's on the App Store, so the consumers can just download it from the App Store. So it's a direct sort of model, I guess.
Awesome, okay. So identifying maybe what consumer on the app market would be a more helpful piece to understand how you would design the logo, design your app to fit and appeal to that customer, right? Because absolutely, your customer is whoever has the app store. And that's kind of, your app store is the channel to get the information to the consumer. But maybe we want to define that customer a little bit more. But you're on the right track, I like it. Excellent. Okay, so let's keep all these good ideas rolling and further refine some of these things with the next couple of activities, okay? Now, I will say, if you were not able to really identify or fully define your value chain or where you would fit, that is okay. This is a very broad kind of idea, and it's hard to know all the little nuances in it, okay? So to help us refine this and identify where we would be placed, or where we would want to position ourselves, we will use a tool called the Business Model Canvas. But first, I think Tom kind of already alluded to this. I want to go through an example of how business models will change. In this case, the automotive industry. So most companies would be producing the individual parts for a car, and then other companies have broader business models that account for various production and delivery. So Tesla, as Tom said, was acquiring the ability to produce their own batteries, and they also then reached all the way to becoming their own dealers for their markets. Where Ford, on the other hand, went for the entire thing, okay? We don't expect you to go for the entire thing. As startups, it's good to leverage on others and leverage on resources that you have at your disposal, okay? But as I said, we want to kind of further refine where we are in our value stream and where we can differentiate ourselves from our competitors. And to do that, we're going to use this business model canvas. Now, you'll see larger versions on the big whiteboards that are at your tables. I think you also have similar questions on the handouts that are on the tables. But I know right now this doesn't make a whole lot of sense because it's very blurry, okay? I want you to take away the main titles of the sections here. So we have key partners, key activities, key resources, value proposition, customer relationships, channels, customer segments, so on and so forth. I can let you all read on the screen. Now, you may be asking how this particular canvas fits with what we've been discussing. Well, I'll tell you. Right now, when you are going to fill out the key activities or the key resources, you are defining how your company is being situated. What differentiates your company? You also can identify your customer, okay? So asking the questions and filling out who your customer is, what aspect of your service or your product is going to go to which person, is identifying your customer. The value propositions and customer relationships is defining this arc between differentiated value, okay? And then the bottom with your cost structure and your revenue streams, that's that green loop of money coming back to your company. Your channel is kind of identified in the middle there. And then you have suppliers, which are your key partners. You can also group investors possibly into this category, but maybe you'll find them fit into your cost structure or revenue stream, so that's why they aren't on this slide here. But this is how this model will tie into what we've talked through. Yes, question?
So for cost structure, is that basically just saying how we're going to charge our consumer or user or whatever difference from like revenue stream? Revenue stream is pretty much explaining how we're making our money.
So revenue stream is how you're making your money. Cost structure is how all of that money will be utilized in your
Oh,
company.
okay, I see.
So it's,
The cost of what are you spending
Yeah,
to
make.
get that
Yeah.
product or solution out there?
Okay.
And hopefully, as was mentioned earlier, hopefully it's less
Then
than the money you bring in.
so the difference between these two would mean a net profit.
Got it.
Or, let me be clear on that. At some point in time, those numbers look good. In the early days, they're not gonna look good, because you're still investing. But at some point, it needs to cross, and those revenues need to cover costs and then some to make that investment that was done up front to be worth it.
Okay.
Yeah, excellent. Are there other questions?
Pretty much the cost of the
Yeah,
Can
all-
you explain a
all
little
the-
bit about value proposition?
Yeah, so in value proposition, this is identifying what value you are bringing unique.
Oh, I see.
So it's what will help you stand
Okay.
out.
Yeah, okay.
Now, for some people, you may just be able to make it more effectively cost-wise, so
Yeah.
your value is just being cheaper,
Yeah.
and your real value from a customer standpoint is you have better customer relations.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
So that's why that kind of differentiated value is going
Yeah.
above.
Okay.
Okay, all right. When we get to that activity, I'll make notes. Absolutely.
Right now,
Oh, okay, all right. So I want to make a quick announcement. On the kind of whiteboards, I want you to not write on them. Use sticky notes to write on them because they aren't whiteboards. They don't erase very well. Okay, so if you want to complete the canvas while we continue our discussion, just use a sticky note. Okay. But we're going to keep going, and we'll break out into the activity where you are able to build out your cost, build out your business model canvas as we go. Okay. But before we do, I want to make it also touch on where this canvas would fit in our discussion of identifying our fits. So we identified 3 fits before, and one of them was the fit of our product and our service. The other was our market fit. Technology and teams are not really there, but they're represented in various capacities throughout the canvas. Okay? But if we were to divide our canvas in half, we would understand what we are providing and how it would meet the need of the market. And so when we're looking at market fit, we're again identifying those gaps. We're identifying in the middle kind of why we are valued or why we should be valued by the customer or the market. What is different about us from other people? And then this is also going to help us identify how we would keep and grow our customer base. Okay, so what would prevent others from coming and stealing our ideas? What would prevent others from stealing our customers? Okay, we also can identify various channels to our customers or to our partners to help us get our idea out on the market. We would also walk through how we can utilize in-house resources, or we can describe our products' value, rarity, imitability, and organization. That's represented with a VRIO. Okay? We also will be identifying what ways we would want to partner with people, and more importantly, what opportunities would we be willing to share with our partners? So maybe we want to identify our secret sauce that was kind of discussed in previous Difference Maker events from other people, and what would we be willing to kind of have others do on our behalf or for us? Okay, so we can identify what is core to us and what is broader in the grand scheme of things. In the product service side, we can also identify the strategy for us to maintain the competitive advantage. Okay, this is a key one for helping startups kind of stay successful. We want to make sure that we can be sustainable, and that we have a plan to maintain that competitive edge. All right, and then at the bottom, as was kind of already addressed, we have the cost structure and revenue stream, ultimately identifying what profits that we can have down the line, as Tom said. Okay? So,
Okay.
yeah, go ahead.
And ultimately, what this is are kind of the key questions that you have to have in the story that you're going to tell to all your stakeholders, which includes potential customers, potential investors, potential partners, potential early employees who you're probably not going to be able to pay well, but maybe give them stock options that they have to believe at some point in time are going to be worth something, right? And also maybe those government regulators who may need to put some things in place to help you bring your solution to market if it's compelling. So this narrative, this story, has to touch on most of these key questions. And so be thinking about them, and we've put them in these spaces because that's where they align in that business model canvas. And so if you start thinking this in a more holistic way, that's a good way to frame it.
Mhm. Yeah, this will make you marketable for people to buy your product or to invest in your business. Absolutely. Now, making these will be daunting, I'm sure, especially if this is your first time trying to wrap your head around how to make a business. And so it's important to keep in mind that ultimately this is going to be a series of guesses. You're ultimately, in order to determine if your business model and your business approach makes sense, or if it's successful, you will need to test it. You will try it out with various people. You need to see what your customer base thinks. You need to see if the suppliers are even interested, okay? So when you're developing these models, think of them as starting points. Feel free to take guesses, to make hypotheses about what you would see down the line. Make short-term goals and long-term goals. That way you can understand maybe how things will evolve and change, or what opportunities you should keep in mind down the line as you are growing. Yeah.
And you all wouldn't be here if you hadn't already made some of those educated guesses, those assumptions about, hey, I get something cool, I think there's an opportunity for it, and I think I see a path to at least getting it to that next stage. Those are all assumptions, hypotheses, educated guesses. Put them down. Chances are, a good number of them may not be right, but to Carter's point, that's your starting point.
Yeah, absolutely. You've already done a lot of the legwork in identifying some of these things. But we're gonna go through a little bit more detail. So we're gonna start off with an activity. You can work with your team members, you can work with the people at your table and pick a idea or a product or service that you're wanting to provide. And I want us to fill out kind of the left side of our business canvas, okay? This left side has been broken down into a series of questions on the handout that is floating around on the tables, okay? So this left-hand side of the product and service is the table that has the identify the solution at the top. So for your idea, your service, your product, I want you to fill out this table as kind of seen on the screen, and then we'll take a break, allow people to share, and then we will then move on to the right-hand side where we're talking about our market, okay? So I say 10, 15 minutes for this. To start, we can always add and change as we need.
So one other recommendation, and all of you are also assuming that you understand the problem that you're trying to solve, right? I would suggest that if you get that piece wrong, then the rest is not going to follow. You may get lucky and still find something compelling, but start by also questioning how well you understand the problem that you're seeking to solve. And that will then help you understand the fit eventually to what you're looking to deliver to the market. that make sense? All right.
All right. If anyone has any questions, we'll be floating around and we'll be able to answer and provide guidance as we go. But we have a lot of great facilitators here that can also help along the way. Alrighty, do we have a team or teams that want to walk us through maybe a couple of the bullet points from their left side for the product service? I love it. So if you can, walk us through very quickly your problem, your potential solution, and then let's identify your customers and your suppliers. Let's start with that.
And so our customer is people who don't have time to look into upcoming elections, who might not be aware of where they can vote, or when people who aren't motivated to vote, that don't really know the stakes. And so what our project ends up providing is clear, concise, and accurate information, easily and freely available. And so this entails information on where to register and vote, options for mail-in ballots, choices in candidates and those, broken down with the goals, accomplishments, and donations of each, and furthermore, progress on current candidates with their promises.
Do we have another team that wants to walk us through their idea and some of the left side of their business canvas? Yeah, you guys got it. Okay, put my hand in it too. You wanna go first? Okay. All right, there you go.
Okay, the team name Sohel. The problem, inavailability of low-cost, reliable, and mobile food preservation or refrigerators. Describe the proposed solution, a mobile solar power refrigerator or storage box. Clearly explain your solution, close and preserves infant food for timely feeding. What relief do customers gain from your solution? Healthy babies due to timely feeding, prevention of diseases, more time for parent activities. How will you implement your solution? Design and implement a portable refrigerator powered by solar energy. There are other existing solutions like using ice in an insulated box, but I think my solution is appropriate. How will you deliver your solution to customers? Partnering with distribution centers like Walmart. So, what differentiates your solutions from other solutions? Cheaper, more portable, lightweight, individual use, additional power for other charging devices. How will you sustain your solution over time? Improve production from sales and reviews and comments from other users and customers. How will you grow or expand your product community or customer inclusion?
So one thing I would kind of touch on, maybe for yours, I know maybe long term we want to work with Walmart or other wholesalers. Maybe see how we can start off small. How can we distribute to our initial customer base to get feedback on how that refrigeration unit would work or how our products would kind of need to be changed and tweaked in order for us to be sustainable and to be interesting for Walmart.
And
Yeah.
just to build on that, if you had to guess at a group of people who understand that customer base in developing countries really, really well, who would they be? Who do you think is already engaged with, working with, and understands that segment of customer that you are targeting already?
Maybe local hospitals.
Yeah, hospitals, NGOs, non-government
NGOs.
organizations, others who are day to day working with those folks. So, to Carter's point, right? Maybe not Walmart, but what if you reach out to them and convince them that your solution is fantastic? They'll help you distribute it.
Thank you.
Awesome. And then I saw your hand. Do you still want to go? Well, yeah, we got time for one more.
Okay. So, to identify our solution, we have an app that provides the mechanisms for Muslims to stay connected with their religion and maintain their prayer schedules. So the relief that we provide for customers is that the people who use this app will feel confident that they will have a reminder to perform their daily prayers even with their busy daily lives. We'll implement the solution by providing an app that customers can download through their app store. And what differentiates us from the others is that we're totally free, we have no ads, we connect to the Google speaker, and we have no data tracking. We'll sustain this over time by finding revenue sources beyond donations and building a larger customer base. And with more funding, we can increase advertising, which will build for our customer base.
Awesome. Thank you. Excellent. So, quick follow-up. How would your product be differentiated from a normal timer or a alarm on your phone?
So what our product actually does is that before Muslims pray, they usually have a call to prayer.
Mm-hmm.
So this would actually play that.
Nice. Okay. Okay. Awesome. I know we don't have a whole lot of time to allow more sharing, but because I want to get to the next activity as well, which is the other side of our sheet. Okay? So with your team or with your table, continue to develop your idea and develop your business canvas, okay? To understand your market fit, all right? So identify what groups of people would benefit from your solution, and then identify what existing solutions are out on the market. You kind of already touched on these, some of you, in previous outlining of the problem, but we want to call them out and say how you are different from them, how you would meet that group specific need, okay? And we want to really hone in on this, okay?
And just to add to that, on that, how it's better, how it's differentiated, the more that you can quantify that, 20% faster, 30% cheaper, you know, whatever that is, it's going to give more data to whoever you're going to need to convince to adopt your solution. Because they're saying, okay, it's going to cost me X, Y, Z, I'm going to have to change my behavior to embrace it, but it's giving me all this, right? And so it's that balance of cost, change of behavior, to that increase in benefit. If it's small benefit, it's going to be harder to convince them to move. So quantifying, right now, it's a guess. But as you move forward, it's going to get a lot crisper as you refine, embellish, and move forward. So quantify, quantify, quantify.
All right. So we'll break out and do that for our next couple minutes, and we'll try and regroup here as time allows. All right? But in the teams that I talked through, it looks like we have some good initial ideas for what our groups might be that would benefit from our solution, and also what our solution might be and who would be our competitors for that. So, since we are running short on time, I want to ask if there's anybody who wants to share one of their groups that they identified today, or one of the existing solutions that's on the market that would be a competitor for you and your idea. You want to? You got it.
So one group?
Yeah, let's do one group and one solution if you got it.
All right, yeah. So one group I have is for campaigns. So a lot of candidates will run for different races, and so it's hard to stand out from the crowd. And so the solution, the benefit would be that there's better value compared to putting out an advertisement and hoping the right person's going to watch it and get the right message. So being able to distill your information, what you stand for and such, into one platform and be able to get outreach that way. And so one of the existing solutions is Ballotpedia. And the difference is that with that you have to do a lot of the research yourself. So what we have here is condensed and easy to comprehend information that's presented specifically to what matters to you. And so by this you save time.
Excellent. Do you have another team or a group or person that wants to share? Or maybe if you are still in the process of identifying your groups or your solution, is there somebody that wants to share if there was something in here today that was very beneficial to your way of thinking or changed the way you approached identifying groups or your competitive solutions out there?
One of the cool things I learned today was that I didn't quite realize this, but when investors look at this, apparently they don't look at it as the tech is fundamentally always going to be incredibly important, always going to be incredibly useful. The market changes, the technology changes, but fundamentally they look for people or teams instead. They look for people who are extremely competent and can change for these markets. That's not something I quite realized, but that makes a lot more sense because, yeah, a lot of this, we're just at the start of something and we don't really understand what's out there. We don't know the market. But if you can prove your competency, those things can come out of it. That's pretty important.
What I've also learned is that your product or service can have different customer segments, and within those different customer segments, the value proposition can change between those customer segments. So that's what I learned.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, you got something?
Yes, I do.
Absolutely.
For the group one problem is for active traders, and what benefit does the solution deliver? Is reducing the risk of the market decline. So if you're an active day trader, you get to reduce waiting for a longer time to buy a stock. Mm-hmm. And for solutions that's already out there, a lot of people get confused that there's other, brokerages that does it. But if you look at like brokerages like Robinhood, they only have a certain amount of cryptocurrency that you can buy. But if you have cryptocurrency that is not on that platform, you have to get it from another one. And most cryptocurrency platforms, they do not allow day trading or stock buying. So you have to transfer that cash into the other one. So the problem is not taking the crypto and selling it off to get cash. Like you get cash right away. The problem is taking the cash and putting it into the bank account, which takes a few days to clear.
So your existing solution would be differentiated because, or not your existing solution, your proposed solution would be to make that process faster.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
I'll share a few words about what I gathered tonight. There was a lot of things actually. What stood out the most was know where your product is or business in the value chain, and try to understand it to the point where you know that to maximize value, you want to head in the direction that will allow that to be possible. And second thing that I'd like to just mention was, although it might seem obvious, but focusing on your value is key. If you look at if you think of successful companies, you'll see how they focus exactly on what their value is, and that's part of their secret to success.
Yeah, secret to success is maintaining your true core and making sure you're keeping that at your focus. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. All right, so I think for the interest of time, I'll turn the floor back over to you, sir, for closing remarks and any remaining updates that they should have.
All right, thank you very much. So recap, what's next for Difference Maker? The toolkit workshops, you're going to work on your solutions and your resources and feasibility. And you can add and update your information on the idea plan outline as you complete each workshop and the corresponding worksheets. Remember, it's due March 3rd, a couple of days from now by 5 o'clock. If you have any questions, let us know. Send me an email. And we have one more, delivering your rocket pitch. If you end up going to the preliminaries, you'll be going to that, delivering your rocket pitch. That'll be a mandatory session. And we also have a workshop evaluation we'll be passing out, much like the previous workshops. And thank you all for coming tonight. And here's our social media if you need us.